Welcome to the Dearly Discarded podcast. My name's Jared St. Clair, and I'm your host for each of these episodes. And I'm really excited for my first international interview today. We're going to be talking to Tyson Illingworth. I believe I got the name right. I hope
Yes,
so.
you did. Yeah.
Excellent. Tyson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Tyson, you and I have never met. We've spoken for about a minute and a half, prior to recording this. So, your story will be brand new to me as well as to those listening. And I'm really excited to have you here on the show.
Thank you.
And so, I want to ask you just first for people that are listening and tuning in that aren't aware of who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so yeah, I'm an Australian, currently in Australia at the moment, and I'm a composer and music producer, sound engineer. I write music for things like some of my recent projects have been Disney on Ice, um, various TV commercials, and also I release pop songs around the world that are on the radio and tour the world and play those songs to thousands of people.
Well, I am as a kid, I wanted to be a DJ. That was my thing. Now, back then, DJ was a little different than what it is now, I guess. But, I wanted to be on the radio, playing songs. And, well, that never happened. So I decided to do podcasting instead. So what you do is extremely intriguing to me. What an amazing career. I love that.
I've always wanted to do a podcast actually, but so yeah, it's funny. It's funny how is the grass greener on the other side? I don't know. You get to do it from the comfort of your own home.
Exactly. Yeah, I've actually been doing local radio for about 14 years, but talk radio, nothing having to do with music. But I'm a absolutely massive music fan, so very excited to talk to you. So you are. You're in Australia. You are someone who you tour with your music as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a point in my career before the pandemic where I was playing 150 shows a year. So that's wild. That's like every night in a different city. So I'd go to Asia and I would be playing one night in Indonesia and then one night in Macau and then Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, and then all around China. And like it was just never ending. And then I'd fly to Canada to all of the cities there, and then to America, and yeah, so on. So I'm definitely I got thrown around the world a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting. It must give you just crazy perspective being able to see so many different parts of the world and different cultures and everything. That would be a really interesting career for sure.
Yeah, it's wild to think because for me it's music and my passion is music, but it's really cool to to think back when I was like 20 or even 19 onwards, I was like randomly seeing the Great Wall of China or the Taj Mahal or all these things that people they put on their bucket list. I was just automatically checking them off by being in those countries playing shows. So I didn't get to stay for long periods of time anywhere, but I always get to at least see some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it was really, really cool to have so many years of seeing all these different cultures and how people live and yeah, get that worldview, I guess. It's quite
Yeah,
wild.
absolutely. So cool. So how long have you been touring?
Since I was 16. I'm 35. Yeah, I'm 35
Oh, wow.
now. And when I was 16 is when I started to play my first interstate shows. So from my first shows as a DJ were in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. But then I was playing in Sydney, and then eventually I was touring all of Australia. And then I guess a big fish in a small pond. I wanted to jump to the rest of the world, so I moved to LA. I lived in LA for 10 years, and yeah, I'd been playing up until the pandemic. I'd been playing shows around the world, everywhere, till everything was
Very,
till
very
everything was
interesting.
locked down, and then I moved back to Australia.
Well, and Australia was locked down about as much as any country in the world, based on what I've read.
Yeah, well, what was wild was it happened. So it was a delayed effect. So my last international shows were in Taiwan, and I remember quite clearly like getting landing in Taiwan airport, and I'd honestly not heard of the word COVID. Um, and I landed in Taiwan, and everyone was wearing masks, and people were talking about this virus, and they were saying, we're really worried it's going to come out of China and get to Taiwan, and it was kind of just like sneaking its way to China, and I was like talking to the promoters who could, some of them speak English, but they had a translator, and they were saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's not going to come to Taiwan." And anyway, when I flew out of Taiwan and got back to America, I went back to Los Angeles and said to my friends, like, you wouldn't believe what's going on over there. There's like this virus that's gone around in Taiwan and in China and that region. And then it was like weeks before everything was locked down in New York, and I was in LA going, oh, I hope it doesn't make its way to like LA. And then suddenly, boom, it hits LA, locks down there, and then there was just a year of no shows and nothing. And then Australia was living it up. They were all at that point. All my Australian friends were like, "Oh man, how are the lockdowns in America? Like that's wild that you guys can't go out and do things." And I got back to Australia, and for the first few weeks, I felt free again, and I was amazed, and like, wow, like people walking around the street. It was just weird to see people walking around the streets without masks on and not threatened. And I remember my mum saying, "Oh, you're finally like safe now. I'm so glad you're out of the dangerous part." And I said, "I watched this thing follow me from Taiwan to LA. I wouldn't be so sure." And she said, "Oh, it'll it's Then it hit Melbourne and Sydney and all of that. They'd been locked down, and then here in Queensland, no one had it, and still people were saying, "Oh, it won't happen in Queensland." And at that point, I was like, "No, it's gonna happen everywhere." Like it was pretty. It was really weird to see, like as a touring artist, to literally watch the thing travel behind me like a tidal wave, and yeah,
Yeah,
eventually
that's
lock us all down.
really, really interesting perspective to have lived it that way. That's wild. So then, when you got back to Australia, when time of year was that?
It was the end of 2021, so around November 2021. Wait, no,
Okay,
2020. Yeah, November 2020. Yeah.
all right. And
Yeah.
at that point, had you done anything with vaccination at that point?
No, no, I hadn't. Uh, it wasn't a mandated thing um, in California or Australia until about I got my first vaccination on October 2nd last year. Sorry, October 1st last year.
October 1st of last year. And
Yeah,
which vaccine did you receive?
the Moderna.
The Moderna. Now you said you're first, so you did receive both of
Yeah.
those, the first and the second.
So yeah, so I got my first one, and the first things that happened were just the normal kind of feeling fluey and sick, but
Uh huh.
I started to across the period of 2 weeks not be able to feel my hands or my feet, and I was losing my motor skills quite rapidly, and uh, I couldn't feel my hands. Like I could touch them like this, but there was no feeling. It was the weirdest sensation, and being 35 and had never felt that experience, I knew that something has to be up. So I texted my spinal surgeon and I said, hey mate, what does it mean if I can't feel my hands or my feet? And he sent me a text, and his first message was, "Did you just get the vaccine?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, um, "I don't want to alarm you, but if the symptoms you're getting are not feeling your hands or feet, then it can only be evidence of a catastrophic neurological failure or problem. So get to the hospital now." I went to the hospital, was became an inpatient, and my motor skills just continued to rapidly decline while I was in the hospital, and to the point where it was hard to walk. I wasn't completely paralyzed, but I was, having to do tests to be able to walk around traffic cones, and at some points I was knocking them over, and yeah, I'd lost my like functionality in my like a lot of my body as it slowly kind of moved up my arms and legs. And then, sorry if I'm ranting. Don't if you want
No, you're
anything
fine.
information.
Keep
So
keep
yeah,
telling your story.
yeah, from there, in the hospital, the I was asked by my spinal surgeon said to demand for a D-dimer test. I asked for a D-dimer test, and the doctor said no, there's no need to. And I said, but I want one, and it became quite a little bit aggressive about getting that. To this day, I still haven't seen the results of that test. They said it was all fine, and they quizzed me on any previous drug use that I'd had in my life, and I could have named anything. I mean, everyone's been like I'm sure in the music industry, everyone's like tried something. Like I'm not claiming to be like, I'm not talking about things like heroin or hard drugs like that. But I mean, I could have named anything, but I named nitrous oxide, and that was it's happy gas. It's used as a general anesthetic by dentists regularly. So the second I said that, the doctors immediately became very dismissive, and discharged me from the hospital with neuropathy, a diagnosis of neuropathy. They did an MRI of my brain and my spine, and they found a lesion in my spine, and they said that it was neuropathy due to use of nitrous oxide, which is perplexing because after speaking to multiple doctors afterwards, that kind of previous use of something that's used as a general anesthetic shouldn't cause acute paralysis instantly within 3 weeks of taking a vaccine. Like like I think it's if you're trying to define the cause of the issue, I felt a little bit gaslit in the sense of like, here's something we can pin it on, so we'll pin it on that. But I believed them because I'm very pro science, and very much for the scientific method. And so I said I took like an idiot. I mean, a lot of people have called me all sorts of things on the internet since I made this story public, but a lot of people have said, well, how stupid is he for getting a second one? But I honestly never thought that the medical industry could be, I just didn't think it could be corrupted. I thought doctors take an oath to help their patients. And so I asked the neurologist if, I'm safe to take a second Moderna shot. And she said, absolutely. And you should, because if you don't, your first one will be redundant. You have 1 month window. You have a 1 month window to take the second. And me being a touring artist where my sole income is touring the world, and if you're not double vaxxed, the risk was never to have a career again. I, at that point, wasn't skeptical enough and didn't, something in my gut told me this is the vaccine, not just that something, but also doctors that were texting me that are friends of mine. But I took when the neurologists said you really have to get the second one, yeah, I did, and it sent me back to hospital the second time with the same
Wow.
thing.
So how were your symptoms with the second one compared to the first?
The same. I lost all my motor skills again. I was bedridden. I was staying with my mom at the time because, like, even just trying to get food and things like that, just daily tasks were really hard. But it faded. I do remember asking the doctors if I'll ever get to, like, if I'll ever be able to walk properly again, and they shrugged and just went, I don't know. There was just no information. There was no no real, like, there's no information on this, and they assured me that it's not the vaccine because neuropathy is not a listed side effect. Well, now, just close to a year later, it is a listed side effect in many countries. And
Mhm.
since my article went public, and I mean, I think it only went public because it's a little harder for people to censor me because I have a verified, account with hundreds of thousands of followers and fans. But um, yeah, I was able to cut through to the mainstream media in Australia a little bit, but it's funny because I thought they were interviewing me to ask, to talk about if this is a possible vaccine injury, but instead the articles came out like DJ makes outlandish claims about doctors, and they spun it that way. But the weirdest thing is that I don't want this to be a sob story about me because there's people way worse. I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people now write to me and tell me that they can't feel their hands and feet. They've had neurological issues, and I couldn't believe it. So um, I actually went to five different doctors, and um, I asked them if this could be a vaccine injury, and all five of them said yes. Uh, but they said they can't write it down or they'll lose their job. And that's when that's when I took it to the media because it wasn't about me. It's like, what is going on when doctors are fearing deregistration uh, because they can't talk about something? That's that's limiting free speech, and it goes against the very nature of science. The whole point of science is to be able to speak freely on a topic and have peer-reviewed studies scrutinized and all of that. So that's when it really became an issue for me that was worth talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for doing that because we really, in order to forward this conversation and get the word out to as many people as possible, are people like you that have a large following that need to speak up and not be silenced. And yet, I know that I'm sure you've come under fire besides the media. Uh,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, I've come under fire. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting because even locally here, I'm on local radio in Salt Lake City, Utah, and speaking my concerns about the vaccines and how they were rushed to market and things like that. Very early on in this process, I received letters from angry people listening saying that I was going to be complicit in the death of thousands for making people vaccine hesitant and things like that. The fear and the censorship, the combination of those two things that happened throughout COVID have really thrown a major wrench into science actually being done and the proper research being done, as you said. And it really does smack right up against the scientific method when there can only be one side heard.
yeah. And I'm by no. It's also really strange to have people calling me an anti-vaxxer because I got both vaccines. So,
Right.
like, I've had every other vaccine for tetanus and measles and those things. They've all worked just fine. Um, I'm just currently a little bit skeptical slash anti the one that I got because I I mean it's one thing if I was you know 1 in 10 million or something, but since my news went live, it's like the sheer amount of people that have had neurological side effects are in the thousands, and they're just the ones that are contacting me. And
Right.
I'm taking on this stress and pressure because I'm reading all these people's stories, and it's making me sad. And there's nothing I can do to help. And here in Australia, um, it's if all you have to do is look up APRA, which is so their Twitter handle is at AHPRA. That it's public knowledge that they have sent a letter out to doctors that said that any doctor that goes against the something to the essence of the not the mainstream. What would it be? That goes against the latest, most advanced research. Will is being threatened with deregistration, um, and it's insane because I now know 30 plus doctors that are deregistered. I'm now in a network of people with doctors who have all been deregistered, some who are speaking up and that haven't been deregistered yet. Um, Even my own GP, who I obviously can't name, um, who's helping to treat me, has had a warning. And he said that, yeah, he's under fire for potentially being deregistered. So it's putting people like myself in positions where we're having to secretly get treatment, and the doctors are having to try to work out how to treat people. But that's surely not the right way to go about things, because how can an people, the other thing that happens is that when I said that I saw 5 different doctors and they all said it's vaccine related, but we can't talk about it, the first thing that people write underneath those articles are, well, where's his proof? Well, I can't provide proof if the doctors can't speak about it, and I can't like leak recordings of doctors secretly speaking about it, or I'm committing a crime. So
Right.
it's it's a catch 22. uh,
Yeah, and the thing is, I have had so many conversations now. Like it sounds like you have. You may have had more than I have with people who've been injured, and the story, here in America is the same as the story you're living there, to a very large extent. There are doctors who are willing to say yes, this is what's happened, but they're almost never willing to say it on the record. They'll
yeah.
potentially say it in secret with their patient, and then the doctors that do say anything on the record are absolutely blacklisted, and there's all kinds
Oh.
of backlash that happens.
So is that happening in America too? Because the thing I like from my 10 years of living in America, one of my favorite things about your constitution is the right to free speech. And obviously, I don't implore free speech if it incites violence or anything like that, but like, within reason. But we're talking about medical doctors who've studied for 7 years and have racked up $250,000 in student debt to get to where they are, and then are now being threatened to be deregistered if they just talk about a subject. That's terrifying. That's like a slippery slope to totalitarianism, and that worries me.
Absolutely. And the thing is, yes, our Constitution, in theory, should protect against that type of backlash. But I'll tell you, I have had all of the people that I've spoken with, when I've asked them about the medical care they're receiving and the doctors that are actually helping them, as opposed to the doctors that have turned them away, because most have been turned away by multiple doctors who aren't willing to help them because they're frankly not willing to admit that that is what the root cause of their symptoms are, is the vaccination. Then we have to edit out, if they do mention the names of the doctors, we have to edit out the names of the doctors to protect them from getting in trouble
Yeah,
with the medical boards.
yeah,
It's exactly the same as what you're describing.
that's wild. I didn't know it was like that in America. A big part of me wanted to go back to America to see American doctors because I was under the assumption that they had a lot more free speech than here in Australia.
I think to some degree there may be a little bit more leeway maybe here in the States. I mean, I've certainly am under the impression that in Australia it seems to be a little bit more like Canada, a little bit more, you used the
Yeah.
word totalitarian,
Mm.
than perhaps it is in America, but not much more. The doctors that are treating the injured folks here in America, for the most part, are what are considered integrative medicine doctors, natural doctors, naturopaths, that type of thing. And in many cases, they are asking us not to use their names because they're concerned about their licenses. Many have had their licenses revoked. It's not substantially different here, unfortunately. And of course,
Mm.
here in America, we have Dr. Fauci,
Mm.
who was, the biggest voice in COVID, I think, across the world, and it is the heavy hand that he essentially ruled with here in the United States put everybody into a really tough position. I've had the pleasure of interviewing some pretty big names in this battle, the biggest of which here in America would be Dr. Peter McCullough. Are you familiar with
I know
him?
the name, but I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah. I've interviewed him a couple of times, and he's more published than any cardiologist in the history of this country. 700 different papers that have been published by him in medical journals. He's as pro-vaccination as you could possibly imagine, but he saw the writing on the wall with these particular uh, shots
yeah.
and started to speak up about it. And he's currently embroiled in lawsuits and all kinds of other things
Wow.
because he's been willing to actually speak. And the problem is, Tyson, we have to have those voices. We have to have voices like yours among the injured. We have to have voices in the medical community that are willing to speak out. But when it comes to your career, many people are simply not willing to do it, and it stifles the freedoms that we all have to really get the information that we need. It's a really, really frustrating position for all of us to be in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you raise a really good point. It's definitely frustrating. Um, where it really as well is a huge issue for someone like myself is that I want to trust the scientific method because I'm all about science. I but um, if if people can't even have a conversation about a topic, then how can there be if they, like how can there be peer reviewed studies done if the doctors are being deregistered or told they just can't do it or do the research? Like, so who is conducting the research? This is a question, I guess, for you. I'm sorry, I know you're interviewing me, but like who is conducting the research and providing the stats? Because right now I've had my eyes open to overwhelmingly uh, large numbers of people that have had neurological disorders since getting the vaccine. And I would say that um, if I was able to trust, like if I didn't know that doctors were being stifled and that APRA wasn't stopping doctors from speaking, I would be quite happy to concede to what the hospital discharged me with. Like if the hospital said, you know, this thing that you did in your past is what gave you neuropathy, I would go with the science on it. But I can't trust the science anymore because
Well, that's
yeah,
the problem with the scientific method is it only works if we are able to look at both sides of things. If we're able to have the conversation, as you mentioned, right?
yeah,
I mean, people have a hypothesis or a scientific theory, then they have to test to find out if that theory plays
yeah,
out. But in this case, these things were rushed to market very, very quickly. The companies that have rushed them to market, Pfizer made $36 billion in the first year that the vaccine was out. A blockbuster drug is considered $1 billion in the first year, and they did 36 times
that
that.
name
So there's
that
plenty of
name just terrifies me. A blockbuster drug. Like, I mean, isn't medication? Oh man, sorry. It's just like it's just all of this
no,
blows my mind, and I still to this day, what's wild is I still have to have the only real like band-aid for my treatment is that doctors that don't want to speak up will go, well, we're happy to give you opioids. Like, I mean, like, isn't that a huge problem in itself? Like, America has an opioid epidemic. The doctors now in Australia, like, it used to be that we never want an opioid epidemic in Australia. We never want people addicted to opioids, but suddenly it's easier for a doctor to just go, yeah, here's a script for opioids to get rid of your neurological pain than it is for them to actually look into uh, what's causing the pain and how to treat it. It's
yeah,
mind blowing.
the issues with this are so deep and so disturbing, and it's very, very difficult, for someone like yourself who considers himself, pro medicine, pro science, pro vaccine, all of these things, to be thrust into the position that you're in must have been incredibly disconcerting,
I just
to have to see it in this way
yeah,
now.
I just feel like medicine has let me down. That's
At the very
yeah.
least, I'd say, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about where you're at, though. So you had the significant side effects after the first injection. You had very similar side effects after the second injection. You're how far removed from the second injection now? About 9 months? Do I have that right? 8 months?
Yeah, so yeah, and so I've regained my motor skills. I still have like yeah, I can walk and move and play shows.
Okay.
Yeah, but I suffer from extreme neurological pain. Um, and right now, the only fix for it is actually a drug called Palexia, which is in the opioid family. And I have to take that in the morning. I wake up in severe pain. It's like this. It's a really strange pain too. It's not like anything I've felt before. I've broken my arms before skateboarding and things like that. I know what it feels like to be in pain, but neurological pain is extremely different. It's like this electric buzzing that shoots down my spine to my feet and my hands. And like, as I talk to you right now, if I like tap my hand on the table, it's like this reverberation kind of effect where I feel like slight shock waves like through my nerves. And so where I'm at now is just I'm grateful that I have my all of my motor skills back, but in a lot of pain all the time unless I take painkillers, and that's my concern is because I don't want to be long term addicted to painkillers because that's not a way to fix the problem.
Well, yeah, it doesn't fix anything, unfortunately, and replaces one problem with another, potentially, or
Yeah,
adds another problem. So,
yeah.
have you found other things besides the opioids that have helped? Any diet changes or supplementation or any of those types of things?
Yes, so aggressive amounts of B12
Okay.
have helped. But please don't take this as medical advice. I am no doctor, I'm a musician, but I'm just telling you what I've done. So I've been injecting myself daily intramuscularly with B12, just a vitamin, um, because the there was the lesion in my spine that showed up on the first MRI after the first vaccine showed that compared with my blood panels, they were able to work out that I was severely lacking in B12,
Okay.
and B12 was extremely important for your for neuropathy,
Right.
or for yeah. So I found that takes up the pain away a lot more, but it also gives me energy in the day to to function. Um, I do have a protocol which is a whole bunch of vitamins, um, like vitamin C in quite large amounts, zinc, all these things. But it's quite tailored. It's a tailor-made kind of cocktail
Hmm.
of vitamins for me. Um, like there are some people that I know that have had extreme heart issues, that the cardio problems.
Right.
I don't know if I don't know what the treatment is for those. Like I think I've heard like some people use like a steroid or like prednisolone. I think it's quite I don't know. But
Prednisone, I think.
that's it.
Hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, for me it's vitamins, and then I I have to just be strict on diet. Um, the reason why I do the B12 injections as well is because you can only get B12, from my understanding, from meat. And I can't be eating steaks every day because then my cholesterol goes high.
Ah,
So to make up for it, I that's why I inject the B12.
gotcha.
But yeah, just a whole lot of vitamins, and honestly, it's just a lot of guesswork from doctors. I'm very, very fortunate to have a network of, yeah, like I said, over 30 doctors that are deregistered, but are still qualified talk to me about this.
Sure.
And so they've all talked amongst each other and come up with like a plan, but or at least what they think is the best treatment and the things to try. But these kinds of treatments aren't public or made public or known because they can't talk about it. And if a practicing doctor tries to give it to someone with neuropathy, then they're gonna and they say it's because of the vaccine, they're gonna lose their job as well.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the things that I've found very frustrating in talking to people who've been injured here in the States is when I ask them that question, because that's one of the questions I ask everybody, because, about, I think half the people that listen to this show are people that are interested in the stories that have not been injured, and the other half are fellow injured people that want to hear, hopefully, hopeful news from people like yourself that, yeah, there are things that I can do to potentially help myself. And what I have found to be frustrating is that everybody seems to be on a very different protocol. There are some similarities, but it's because their
yeah,
doctor is kind of doing the best they can with the information they have. The
they're
information's
they're
not
winging it.
there. Yeah, they're winging it very, very
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
And so it's a lot of
yeah,
guesswork, and nobody quite knows exactly what these vaccines are actually doing in the body. And so there's a lot of questions, and those questions can't be answered from the research because nobody's doing the research.
yeah. Something that I've found that has been a common subject is that everyone that I know that has contacted me that's been vaccine injured, um, it seems to have heightened any kind of issue that they had in the past. Some people absolutely had no issues. Like for me, I never had neuropathy.
Right.
I never had. I've never had a bad medical record, and then just bang neuropathy. You know, but there's a lot of people that have said like, oh, I had like this little thing that was wrong with me, but then they took the vaccine and it's like it attacked that. Again, this is very unscientific of me to say that, but it just seems to be a very common thing that people are saying, like that it's worsened problems that people have already had, and it's made it. It seems to have like made those problems orders of magnitude worse than they were before.
Yeah, I've
Um,
certainly witnessed that myself. I agree with you on that. And then of course people like yourself that were otherwise healthy have also had major impacts from this. It's been an interesting thing to see, and one of the things that has been really fascinating to me, and frankly very saddening, is the number of young people. I mean, you're 35, which doesn't qualify as old in my book. I'm going to be 50 next week. But I've talked to I've had a 12-year-old on here, and a 15-year-old, and a 20-year-old, and a 22-year-old. I just spoke to a 24-year-old yesterday. A lot of younger people being significantly impacted by this, which is I don't know, to me even more tragic when you consider
yeah.
that they were completely healthy going in.
Do you know what's wild again is so my my business partner, I have a company that a few companies actually besides music, but one where we're working in artificial intelligence and machine learning with music. And anyway, I was kind of talking to him about my vaccine injuries and things like my vaccine injury, and like said to him, like how I'm having a really bad day today. I'm getting this migraine and my vision's blurry. Anyway, it was only a week or so ago that he told me that his 16-year-old daughter went and got the vaccine because the government here made it free, and they did like a promotion. Like if you go in, you can just get it. She's 16. Now she's in hospital, and they're recommending a pacemaker for her. Her heart's shot. Um, this is like become normal now for me to hear. I'm hearing
Yeah.
this all the time.
Yeah, I know.
And
Unfortunately, I'm hearing it too.
and my best friends who are scientists, some of them have said to me to stop talking about it because it's unscientific, and I'm so surprised. I'm so surprised. I got in an argument with one of my friends who, yeah, he's a scientist, and he said that I'm doing a very big disservice by talking about it. To me, that makes no sense. Scientists should be able to question everything.
Absolutely. That is how we advance science, is by questioning. That is what science is, right? At its core.
Yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I am super happy to hear that you've at least been able to recover to the extent that you have up to this point. Do you feel like you're still improving, or are you more
yeah.
stagnating?
I feel like I'm definitely improving.
Excellent.
Except for the pain, which I take medication for.
Right.
And that's what I'm currently in the process of trying to fix. So, um, it was terrifying to think at the time that I may not be able to walk properly again. To get that back and everything, like those things back, is like having a second life. It's amazing, but I'm just trying to find the best way to address the pain, and opioids aren't the answer. Uh,
No.
but things like Tylenol and stuff like that are not really strong enough or not working. But yeah, there is hope for people that have had neurological effects, especially if anyone is watching this uh, has is in the thick of it. Um, I can at least be here to say, hey, I got my motor skills back. Um, but yeah, I really think the bigger issue that needs to be spoken about and the word needs to be spread that doctors are gagged in Australia. Like that's a fact. That's not even like that's not me being a conspiracy theorist anymore. Like not that I ever was a conspiracy theorist, but you know, I I did my research. I did my due diligence. I saw five different doctors, all independent of each other, and pretended as though they could be my GP, just to just to show them what was going on with me. And they all said this is a vaccine reaction, but I can't talk about it. And then when you compare that to APRA's letter that went out to everyone in Australia, all the doctors saying you'll be deregistered if you go against the narrative. Well, it's right. It's there in writing for people to see. So just the public needs to know about it. The public needs to know like how how can you trust your GP if they can't talk about a topic? I could rant like this forever. It frustrates me quite a lot. I'm sorry if I brought any negative vibes to your podcast.
I'll tell you, Tyson, the problem with this podcast is trying to keep, some sort of positive energy talking to injured people each time that I do it. But these stories need to be heard. And what's refreshing that I will say, and I know you haven't had an opportunity to hear any of the other shows that I've done up to this point, but I would encourage you to go back and listen to a couple of the shows, because one of the things that's been really interesting that I'm definitely sensing from you, but that I've absolutely felt from many others that I've interviewed as well, is the level of positivity that folks like yourself are still holding out hope that, yes, I will get better. My life isn't over. It's been turned upside down for sure, but there are things that I'm finding that are helping me, and people still doing these interviews even with a smile on their face, even though they're experiencing the pain and the discomfort that you've talked about. It's been very encouraging to me, and one of the things that I hope that comes from this podcast is that voices like yours being heard will start to change these gag orders and all of the other stuff that you're talking about, because I agree that is the bigger picture issue that we're dealing with, is that those who need to talk are being told that they cannot.
Yeah, I definitely have found so much comfort in and thank you for having me on the show. I've found so much comfort in realizing that. I mean, as sad as it is to know that so many people have been injured, uh, I thought I was pretty much a very rare case. I was told
Yeah.
that I was a 10 in a million case or something like that. But there is some comfort in knowing that you're not alone if this has happened to you. That this has happened to a lot of other people as well, and maybe perhaps in the near future, there'll be independent studies done that actually do cut through, and there will be these kind of gag orders. There's safety in numbers. I would definitely implore anyone who's had um, an injury to actually talk about it and to link up with everyone else, because um, this gaslighting in the medical industry right now is terrifying, and with enough people to say, hey, this is, happened to me, this has happened to me, there's got to be a point where the doctors or the government turn around and say, okay, we have to address this problem. Like
Yeah,
it's too many.
that's what we all need to hope for, and that's why we do this podcast. And you bring up something that gives me an opportunity to mention React 19. For those of you listening, if this is the first time you've listened to this podcast, react19.org is a great place to link up with other people who have been injured. There are over 40,000 members now, which is a sad number to state. But there are over 40,000 members of React 19 right now that are vaccine injured or families of those who have died. And that is unfortunately, I believe, a very, very small percentage of the people, because most people are led to believe this isn't happening. And the
Yeah,
majority of people, as you mentioned, Tyson, when they first are injured, are led to believe that, yeah, they are alone. This is a really, really rare thing. And yet it doesn't seem to be nearly as rare when you start to see the thousands and thousands of people speaking out, which is why we have to share these stories. So if you're listening right now, share this podcast, let people know, put it on your social media feeds. We do need to get the word out, and people need to be aware of what's happening.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate you talking to me about the subject.
Hey, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we were able to link up. I hope that your recovery continues to get better and better and better, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much, Tyson.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.